Last spring, in a driveway in Ottumwa, Iowa, a man watched a tow truck haul his neighbor's 9-year-old sedan away to the scrapyard. There was nothing wrong with the engine. The body was straight, and the tires were good. A single electronic module had failed, and the quote to replace and program it came to more than the whole car was worth, so the car was thrown away. That same afternoon, the man walked to the other end of his own driveway, turned the key on his grandfather's 1965 pickup, and it started on the first crank, the way it had for 60 years. He has never once paid a dealer to touch it. He fixes it himself in an afternoon with his own 2 hands and tools his grandfather owned. 2 vehicles, 1 driveway. One of them was disposable at 9 years old. The other one is 60 and shows no sign of stopping. The difference is not the metal. It is a way of thinking that we abandoned, and that a growing number of very smart drivers are now deliberately going back to. We were sold a story about progress, and most of it was true. Cars today are safer, cleaner, and more reliable than anything built in 1965, but somewhere in that trade, something was quietly taken out of the deal, and almost nobody noticed the clause. We gave up the ability to understand and repair the thing we own. A 1965 engine was a machine a person could learn. A modern car is a sealed network of computers that decides for itself whether you are permitted to fix it. That is not an accident of complexity. It is a choice made deliberately, defended in courtrooms, and backed by tens of millions of dollars. And the people who saw it coming are quietly walking back toward the methods their grandfathers used. 3 things are worth knowing before we go on. The first is what those 1965 methods actually were, because they were not primitive, and they were not nostalgia. They were a discipline that reliably produced engines that ran for 500,000 miles. The second is exactly what changed, and how a car went from a machine you owned to a machine that merely tolerates you. And the third is the part that would sound like a conspiracy if it were not a matter of public record. In court filings, anyone can read what happened when American voters tried to take the right to repair their own cars back, and what the industry spent to stop them. This is not a story about old cars being better. In most ways, they were not. It is a story about ownership, about the difference between a thing you can understand and a thing that understands you, and about why the smartest drivers in America are quietly rebuilding an old kind of independence, one habit at a time. Subscribe, and let me show you what they know. Start with what a 1965 method actually was, because the phrase gets used carelessly. The man's grandfather worked at a skelly station on the edge of town, and he had a way of doing things that was less a set of tricks than a way of seeing. He believed a machine told you what was wrong with it if you paid attention. So he listened to engines. He read a spark plug the way another man reads a letter, holding the porcelain up in the sunlight and seeing in its color whether the mixture was rich or lean. He hooked a vacuum gauge to the intake and watched the needle, and the way it steadied or trembled told him about valves and rings and timing before he ever pulled apart. He put his hands on a valve cover to feel the rhythm underneath. He could lay the tip of a long screwdriver against a valve cover and put the handle against his ear, and the steel would carry the sound of a single tapping lifter up out of the roar of the whole engine. He could smell a rich exhaust from across the bay. He could feel a misfire through the fender with his bare hands before the driver ever complained of one. None of that was guesswork. It was diagnosis, done with the senses, and it was frequently more accurate than a code read off a screen today, because a code tells you which sensor is unhappy, while the old methods told you why. The second half of the method was prevention, and it was the more important half. He warmed an engine before he leaned on it. He gave a cold engine an easy first mile. He changed the oil often and watched what came out of the pan. He chased a new noise the same day he heard it, when it was still a $10 problem rather than a $1,000 one. He kept the machine clean enough to see a fresh leak the day it started. None of it was clever, all of it was cheap, and it is the entire reason his 1965 truck is still in that driveway. He did not build a better truck than Detroit built. He simply never let a small thing become a large one for 60 years without a single exception, and he taught it, which mattered more than doing it. His customers came in for gas and left knowing to pull their own dipstick at the pump to take the long way home once a week, so the engine got hot enough to burn off the moisture. To come see him the day a sound changed rather than the month after. He was not selling repairs. He was selling the absence of them. His whole reputation on that road was built on cars that did not come back, which is the strangest business model imaginable, and it worked because in a small town, a man who saves you a rebuild is a man you send your brother to. And the third piece, the one that matters most for this story, is that everything he did was possible. The machine was open to him. He could reach every part of it. He could understand what each piece did by looking at it. Nothing on that truck required a password, a subscription, or permission. When something broke, he fixed it, and the truck did not have an opinion about who was allowed to turn the wrench. That openness was not a feature anyone advertised, because in 1965, no one imagined a world where it could be taken away. Then it was taken away, slowly, in 100 small steps that each seemed reasonable on its own. The first steps were genuinely good. Electronic ignition and fuel injection made cars run cleaner and start better in the cold, and they made the carburetor's fussy rituals obsolete. Sensors and computers made engines more efficient than any carburetor ever could. Nobody should mourn the points and condenser. That part of the change made cars better, and it made them last longer, and the record shows it plainly.
Before we go on, I made something special for you. A guide for men like us, who still believe a man should be able to keep his own car running. It's the Forgotten Mechanic's Handbook, the old-fashioned car repair secrets our grandfathers used to fix any engine and keep it running for decades. But these skills are disappearing fast, and once they're gone for good. Don't pay another mechanic ever again. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link below. Go ahead, I'll wait right here.
But the machine kept closing. Under the hood, a plastic cover went over the engine, so the working parts were no longer even visible. Systems that a person could once reach were sealed, and parts that once cost a few dollars were bundled into modules that cost hundreds. Then the software arrived, and the change became something different in kind. A new part was no longer simply a part. It had to be programmed, matched to the car's computer, and authorized. And the tool that does the authorizing belongs to the manufacturer. That is what the trade calls parts pairing. You can buy the part, you can install the part correctly, and the car can still refuse to accept it because a computer has not been told to say yes. Then came the last step, and it is the one this whole fight is about. The car began to phone home. Modern vehicles gather enormous amounts of data about themselves and transmit it wirelessly back to the manufacturer, which is called telematics. That means the manufacturer often knows a car needs service before the owner does. It means the diagnostic information that once lived on a port under the dash, where any shop could reach it, increasingly lives on a wireless channel that only the manufacturer controls. The independent shop down the street can be locked out of the very information it needs to do the work, and so can you. Here is what that adds up to in a driveway. A 9-year-old car, mechanically sound, with a failed module. The part exists. The independent shop is competent. But the programming is gated, the labor to chase it is expensive, and the quote crosses the value of the car, so the car goes to the crusher with 200,000 good miles left in it. Nobody planned that outcome in a boardroom. It is simply what happens when every small closure stacks on top of the last one. The grandfather's truck could not be totaled by a module because there was no module. The neighbor's sedan was killed by a permission slip. Now, here is the part of the story that has a paper trail, and this is where it stops being a matter of opinion. In 2020, the voters of Massachusetts were asked a simple question. Should car makers be required to give vehicle owners and independent repair shops access to the mechanical data their own cars generate, including that wireless telematics data? It was a plain question about who owns the information your car makes about itself. The voters answered by a margin of roughly 3-1. About 75% said yes. That is not a close vote. That is not a divided public. That is a landslide in a country that agrees on almost nothing. The Automakers Trade Association, the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, which represents nearly all the major manufacturers, filed suit to block the law less than 3 weeks after the election. Their arguments, and it is only fair to state them accurately, were about cybersecurity and safety. They argued that opening telematics data to third parties would create a risk of malicious actors reaching into vehicles, that the law conflicted with federal vehicle safety law, and that it threatened their intellectual property. Those are not frivolous concerns. Cars are computers on wheels now, and the security of a moving vehicle is a serious thing that deserves serious treatment. But look at what happened next, because the scale of the response tells you something the arguments do not. The campaign against that ballot measure raised somewhere in the neighborhood of $27 million, funded by the major automakers. It became the most expensive ballot fight in the history of the state of Massachusetts. $27 million spent to convince the residents of one New England state that they should not be allowed to read the data their own cars produce. And when the voters said yes anyway, by 3-1, the lawsuit began, and it did not end for more than 4 years. The case sat and sat through a trial, through a judge who went silent on it for over a year, through federal regulators who at one point told automakers that the state law was preempted and that they need not comply before later reversing course. It was finally decided in February of 2025 when a federal judge dismissed the automakers' remaining claims and the law stood. More than 4 years after 3/4 of a state voted for it. 4 years is the part to sit with. Not the verdict, the delay. A law can win at the ballot box by 3-1 and still be tied up for the better part of a decade, and during every one of those years, the old arrangement simply continued, which is its own kind of victory for the side that is in no hurry. Meanwhile, the fight moved to Washington, where a federal repair bill has been proposed and argued over and countered with a rival bill backed by the industry itself, and where the whole question of who may fix your car is still unsettled. The public settled it years ago. The machinery has not caught up, and some of that machinery is being paid to move slowly. Then the voters of Maine passed their own version in 2023 by an even wider margin, over 80%. And in January of 2025, the same trade association filed suit against Maine. And this is not only about cars, which is how you know it is about something larger. The same fight has been running through American farm country for years, where tractors became rolling computers and farmers found they could no longer fix their own equipment in the middle of a harvest without a dealer's authorization. In January of 2025, the Federal Trade Commission, joined by several states, filed suit against John Deere over its repair restrictions. Think about what that means. A farmer standing in his own field, on his own machine, during the only 2 weeks of the year that pay his mortgage, waiting for permission. The people who fed this country for 200 years by fixing whatever broke, told they were no longer qualified to touch their own property. Cars, tractors, phones, appliances. It is the same argument every time, and the same public keeps giving the same answer. Whatever you believe about the security arguments, look at the plain shape of the thing. Voters ask, overwhelmingly, for the right to their own car's information. The industry spends tens of millions to stop them, loses, sues, loses again, and sues the next state. There is a word for a fight you keep fighting after the public has told you no 3 times, and it is not confidence. Something in that data and in the control it represents is worth a very great deal of money, enough to spend $27 million in a single state to keep it. Here is the part of his story we skipped. The man in that Ottumwa driveway did not learn the old methods from a book, and he did not learn them because he loves old trucks. He learned them because he was a boy in that Skelly station, handing his grandfather tools he could not yet name. The old man would put a screwdriver in his hand, press the handle to the boy's ear and the tip against a running engine, and let him hear the tap of a valve carried up the steel into his own skull. He would hold a spark plug in the sunlight, point at the color on the porcelain, and say, "What is it telling you?" For years the boy could not answer. Then one afternoon he heard a lifter go quiet after an adjustment and knew, before his grandfather said a word, that they had gotten it right. The old man just nodded and handed him the next plug. The boy did not think of it as a skill. He thought of it as simply how you treat a machine you intend to keep. He is a grown man now with a modern car in his garage that he is not permitted to fix, and a 60-year-old truck that he is, and he has spent the last several years quietly moving his life back toward the truck. He is not alone. Millions of Americans are doing the same thing, most of them without ever calling it a movement, because here is the number that shows it. The average vehicle on American roads is now about 12.8 years old. That is a record, and it has climbed for 8 straight years. Passenger cars average around 14.5 years. There are nearly 290 million light vehicles on our roads, and the scrappage rate has stayed low, which is a technical way of saying that Americans are keeping their cars and fixing them instead of replacing them on a scale never seen before. Part of that is prices, plainly. New cars and used cars both cost more than many families can bear, but part of it is a decision made in millions of driveways that a paid-off car you understand and maintain is worth more than a loan on a machine that can be bricked by a software update. The nation is voting with its wrenches. So what are the smart drivers actually doing? They are not buying carburetors. That would be foolish, and it would not be a step forward. They are doing something more interesting. They are taking the parts of the 1965 method that never stopped working and applying them to modern machines. The method was never really about the carburetor. It was about the hands and the ears and the habit of paying attention. And none of those went obsolete. They are going back to prevention, which is the heart of the whole thing. Warm the engine and give it an easy first mile, because most engine wear still happens cold on any engine built in any year. Change the oil on time rather than stretching it to the last mile the manual permits, because the interval on the sticker was written for the fleet, not for your short, cold trips. Chase a new noise the day you hear it, while it is small. Look under the car once a week for a fresh spot on the ground. Not one of those habits requires a single tool, and every one of them still works exactly as well on a 2015 sedan as it did on a 1965 pickup, because the physics never changed. Heat, dirt, and moisture still kill engines, and attention still stops them. They are going back to the senses, alongside the scanner, rather than instead of it. A code tells you which sensor is complaining. It does not tell you why. The driver who knows what his own car sounds like on a normal morning is the driver who notices the new tick in week 1 instead of month 6. That is not nostalgia. That is the earliest and cheapest warning system ever built, and it is standing in your driveway right now, free. And they are writing things down which sounds almost too simple to matter. A log of what was done and when, and a note about anything that seemed a little different, turns a scattered pile of receipts into a picture of an engine's life. One oil change tells you nothing. 20 of them, recorded, tell you the day your car began to use a little oil, or run a little warm, or take a little longer to start. That was the old fleet mechanic's trick, kept on a card in a drawer, and it caught failures a month before they happened. It costs nothing but a notebook and the discipline to use it. They are learning the few jobs that are still theirs to do. On most cars, the owner can still change the oil, the filters, the wipers, the battery, the brakes, and the small forgotten parts that quietly protect the expensive ones. Every one of those is a job that a person can learn in an afternoon and that pays them back for the life of the car. And they are finding the independent shop that has fought to keep its tools and its access, and they are giving it their loyalty, because that shop is the last line between them and a repair monopoly. And the sharpest of them are thinking about all of this before they buy. They are asking a question that would have been nonsense in 1965 and is essential now. Can this thing be fixed? How much of it is gated behind a manufacturer's permission? What happens when the company stops supporting the software? A car that cannot be repaired is not a car you own. It is a subscription with wheels, and the smart money has started to notice. That question has teeth now in a way it never did before. A machine made of steel wears out slowly and predictably, and a man with tools can meet it wherever it fails. A machine made of software fails a different way. It gets abandoned. The company moves on, the servers go quiet, the updates stop, and a car that runs perfectly can become an expensive brick because the thing that authorizes it to run no longer answers the phone. There is no rust for that. There is no tool for that. It is the first failure mode in the history of the automobile that a good mechanic simply cannot fix. And it is the reason the old man's truck, made entirely of things that can be touched, is quietly becoming the more rational machine to own. Which brings us back to why the fight over that data matters so much and why it will not stop. Every one of those habits, taken together, is a repair that never gets sold, A car kept for 20 years instead of 9 is a car not bought. A part replaced by an independent shop is a part not replaced by the dealer. The service department, not the showroom, is where the real profit lives, and it has been for decades. That is not a scandal. It is just the arrangement. But it means that the drivers going back to the 1965 methods are quietly withdrawing from an economy that was built on the assumption that they would not. $27 million in a single state is what that assumption is worth defending. There is no line item anywhere for teaching you to warm your engine, ease the first mile, and listen. The grandfather is gone now, and so is the Skelly station, and so is the whole world where a boy could learn an engine by having a screwdriver pressed to his ear. What we lost was never the tools. You can buy every tool that old man owned today for less money than he paid. What we lost is the assumption underneath the tools, the unspoken agreement that a machine you bought was a machine you were allowed to understand. That agreement held for a century, and it was quietly withdrawn while we were being told about progress, and most of us signed without reading it. And we lost the chain that carried the knowledge, which is the harder loss. It never lived in manuals. It lived in the hands of an older man standing beside a younger one, in a shop with an engine running, and it survived only as long as there was someone to show it and someone paying attention. Break that chain for a single generation, and the knowledge is gone, even while the tools sit right there on the bench. That is nearly what happened. The stations closed, the old men went, and for about 20 years, almost nobody was handed a screwdriver and told to listen. But it is not gone, and that is the point of all of this. It is being taken back in courtrooms, at ballot boxes, where 3/4 of a state can agree on something, and in driveways, one habit at a time, by people who decided that a machine they can keep alive is worth more than a machine they must ask permission to touch. Every one of them is doing what that old man did at the Skelly station, whether they know his name or not. So go out to your own driveway tonight. Start the engine and stand there a moment and listen to it, the way he taught the boy to listen. Learn what normal sounds like, so you will know the day it changes. Warm it before you lean on it. Give it that first easy mile. Fix the small thing while it is still small. None of that requires a password or an appointment, and no one can take it from you. The old man would tell you it was never a secret and never a trick. It was only ever paying attention to a machine you intend to keep. That is what the smart drivers have remembered. That is what the industry is spending millions to make you forget.